Existentialism has always been a restless way of looking at life. It is not a philosophy meant to soothe, but to disturb. It constantly reminds us that we are mortal, that our choices matter, and that freedom does not come without weight. To think existentially is to face uncomfortable questions. Why are we here? What do we do with the time that was given to us? What is the meaning of existing, knowing that everything ends? And it is precisely this awareness of finitude that gives this way of thinking a tense, almost anguishing tone, yet one that is also deeply honest. Curiously, there is a book within the Bible itself that dives into these very questions with striking depth and even so often goes unnoticed. The book of Ecclesiastes. It escapes the traditional religious tone and comes much closer to a philosophical reflection on life, and that is exactly where its strength lies. It speaks both to those who believe and to those who do not, because it deals with something universal, the human experience in the face of time, loss, and the search for meaning. At the center of Ecclesiastes is the idea that life is fragile, fleeting, almost slippery. The author uses a Hebrew word, hebel, which can be translated as vapor, mist, something that appears for an instant and then dissolves. This image says a great deal. No matter how tightly we try to hold on to certain things, they always slip through our fingers. The book suggests that much of what we pursue lacks permanence, because human existence itself is small when measured against time and the vastness of the world. Generations arise and disappear, yet the earth keeps turning. Few remember those who came before us, and we too will likely be forgotten by those who come after. When we look at our lives on the scale of the universe, we realize how brief they are, fragile, vulnerable, transient, and within this landscape, death imposes itself as the great equalizer. The just and the unjust, the wise and the ignorant, the rich and the poor, all ultimately walk toward the same destination. Neither wealth, nor virtue, nor knowledge can change this ending. Death erases distinctions that we often treat as essential. Ecclesiastes also draws attention to something even more unsettling, the unpredictability of life. Unlike other texts that promise rewards proportional to effort, here there are no guarantees. Justice, talent, or merit do not ensure outcomes. The fastest does not always win the race. The strongest does not always win the battle. The wise do not always prosper. The intelligent do not always grow rich, and the learned are not always recognized. Time and chance cross the lives of all. This confronts us with an uncomfortable truth. Human control is limited, and life, to a large extent, escapes our hands. While many say that life is a gift, the wisest man in the Bible begins his reflection by stating precisely the opposite. Everything is vanity. To open one of the most spiritual books in history and be met right away with such a sentence is like receiving a shock. Solomon, surrounded by glory, power, and wisdom, recognizes that everything we build dissolves like sand slipping through our fingers. His first words are not meant to comfort, but to awaken. Vanity of vanities is not a gentle phrase. It is a call to lucidity. When the author says that everything is vanity, he is not merely being pessimistic. He is reminding us that nothing we pursue guarantees permanence. And immediately after, he launches one of the deepest questions ever asked. What real profit does a human being gain from all the effort he makes under the sun? In other words, why do we run so much, accumulate so much, seek so much, if in the end everything seems to slip away? And what makes this even more powerful is that this question does not come from someone resentful, but from someone who had everything. Solomon speaks as one who experienced pleasure, power, recognition, and wisdom. His frustration is not that of someone who failed, but of someone who reached the top and realized that the top was not the end of the ladder. The beauty of Ecclesiastes lies precisely in this. It does not paint life with false colors, nor does it create comforting illusions. It tears away the veils. By affirming that everything is like vapor, Solomon invites us to see the transient nature of all that exists. Nothing in this world is truly solid. The body ages, fame disappears, possessions change hands, and from this awareness, a truer kind of wisdom can be born. One that learns to see things as they are, not as they promise to be. When a career becomes an idol, it begins to consume us. When family becomes the sole foundation of identity, it starts to suffocate. When pleasure becomes a constant escape, it ceases to liberate and begins to enslave. Ecclesiastes does not claim that the world is ugly or devoid of beauty. It claims something deeper. The world cannot bear the weight of our meaning. We cannot demand that transient things sustain what is eternal within us. By observing nature, Solomon perceives something that borders on the absurd. He speaks of the sun that rises and sets every day, of the wind that circles endlessly, of rivers that flow into the sea without ever filling it. Everything seems to function like a tireless mechanism, where movement never stops, yet never arrives at a final destination. The world keeps turning, but without offering a clear sense of completion or ultimate purpose. This image of creation spinning without rest awakens a strange feeling of stagnation, as if life were a great wheel in constant motion, but leading nowhere. And this cycle of nature becomes a mirror of the human condition itself. People are born, live, die, and the stage remains almost the same. History seems to repeat itself. New generations commit similar mistakes, nourish similar dreams, and face the same dilemmas as always. There is a kind of existential fatigue rooted in the very structure of life, and this stands in direct contrast to the modern ideal of infinite progress. We live in a culture obsessed with novelty, evolution, performance, and self-overcoming. Yet Ecclesiastes points to an uncomfortable paradox. No matter how much things change on the outside, inwardly, everything remains much the same. Technologies advance, scenarios shift, but the inner conflicts of the human being remain unchanged. We continue to be proud, vain, hungry for meaning, and fragile before death. By seeing the routine of nature as a reflection of our limitations, Solomon offers us a kind of unsettling clarity. Evolving is not the same as becoming wiser. It is not enough merely to exist or occupy space in the world. We need to understand why we are here. And it is precisely this question that opens the door to a life with purpose. Repetition becomes oppressive only when we do not know what we are seeking. And it is this lost, ignored, or misunderstood meaning that Ecclesiastes seeks to reveal. Unlike most people, Solomon had everything he needed to experience every possible pleasure. He speaks of laughter, wine, grand constructions, lush gardens, riches, and women. He plunged into pleasures like someone diving into a pool, hoping to emerge renewed, but instead rising with empty hands. It is as if he lived the consumerist dream of millions and awakened inside a silent nightmare. The joy offered by entertainment is brief. Banquets do not feed the spirit, and the accumulation of wealth, far from bringing peace, usually only increases anxiety. The human heart carries a hunger that no earthly pleasure can satisfy. Solomon knew this not by theory, but by experience. He does not speak as a distant moralist, but as one who tasted pleasure to its very last drop and still remained empty. His journey makes it clear that the problem is not in things themselves, but in the expectations we place upon them. When we expect pleasure to give meaning to life, it becomes a cruel tyrant. That is why Solomon does not condemn joy, but warns us it cannot become an idol. Life has moments of celebration that deserve to be lived with gratitude, but celebration is not a home. It is only a stop along the way. This vision forces us to look inward and ask honestly, what are we really seeking? Solomon descends from the throne to remind us that, even surrounded by luxury, something essential was still missing. And this something is not found in parties, palaces, or excess, but in a presence that no wealth can buy. And he did not limit his search to pleasure alone. He also threw himself into the pursuit of knowledge. Ecclesiastes states, "In much wisdom there is much sorrow, and he who increases knowledge increases grief." This reveals something profound. To know not only illuminates, but also exposes. It exposes the fragility of life, the injustice of the world, and the impermanence of all things. This does not mean rejecting learning or curiosity. On the contrary, knowledge is a gift that allows us to better understand the world and ourselves. But Ecclesiastes makes it clear that it cannot be our final refuge, nor our ultimate source of security. To seek deep understanding of life almost always implies facing pains we would rather avoid. The more we learn, the more we perceive the flaws of the world, the injustices that persist, and the fragility that surrounds us. Moreover, wisdom is neither fixed nor definitive. What one generation considers truth, the next often revises, expands, or even corrects. Our understanding is always in motion. To dive into the mysteries of life almost always involves crossing more pain than comfort. To know the world deeply is to recognize its corruption, its inequalities, and its limitations. The more we understand how reality functions, the more evident becomes the distance between what should be and what truly is. The fool lives anesthetized by distractions, smiling easily, unaware of these contradictions. The wise person, however, perceives the imperfections and feels a legitimate discomfort. Truth, when faced directly, rarely consoles. On the contrary, it produces a specific kind of suffering, that which is born from seeing the world as it is, without masks or illusions. And yet, understanding reality does not free us from fragility or from death, but it offers something perhaps more valuable, the possibility of living with integrity, consciously choosing how to respond to the pain and chaos that inevitably accompany human existence. Even with all his intelligence and lucidity, Solomon encounters something that no knowledge can circumvent: human fragility before time and the inevitable cycle of death. After reflecting on pleasure and wisdom, he turns his gaze to something even closer to our everyday reality: work. That constant effort that fills the days, steals the nights, and often consumes life itself. The frustration here lies not only in the act of working, but in the fact that no one truly controls the fate of what they build. Life is crossed by work, but death respects no effort. Many build empires, accumulate wealth, and seek recognition, believing this will grant them security or meaning. But Solomon perceives something unsettling. Everything someone builds can fall into the hands of those who despise that legacy. What took an entire lifetime to erect can unravel quickly in the wrong hands. This unease deepens when we think of sleepless nights, anxiety, and exhaustion that accompany those who live only to produce. When work is driven exclusively by ambition, pride, or fear of lacking something, it ceases to be a means and becomes a silent prison. Still, Solomon does not condemn work itself. He affirms that the human being should enjoy the fruits of his effort while he can, but without allowing work to become the absolute center of his identity. Working is necessary, but turning work into the primary source of value, security, or personal fulfillment is a dangerous illusion. Everything we do under the sun must be connected to something greater, deeper than results in numbers. And it is at this point that Ecclesiastes presents one of its most well-known passages. There is a time for everything, and a proper season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die, to plant, and to harvest, to laugh and to weep, to draw near, and to step away. Yet modern society seems to live in dissonance with this wisdom. We want everything fast, immediate answers, instant solutions, permanent comfort. We ignore the rhythms of life and grow impatient with what requires maturation. Solomon also observes something even more disturbing. In the place of justice, injustice is often found. In the place of righteous judgment, corruption. A world governed by imperfect human hands frequently rewards the wicked and penalizes the just. This deeply wounds our natural sense of order. We expect good to be recognized, truth to prevail, and evil to be confronted. But reality does not always correspond to this expectation. Faced with this, Ecclesiastes offers no easy answers nor superficial comforts. It invites us to look directly at the complexity of existence and to make a deep and conscious examination of reality, without fleeing from its contradictions. The book also portrays a figure very familiar to our times, the man who works tirelessly, accumulates goods and achievements, yet has no one with whom to share any of it. This scene precisely reflects the daily life of many today. We pursue goals, productivity, and success, but often neglect something essential: care for the soul and the bonds that give meaning to life. Solitary ambition may disguise itself as virtue, but at its core, it is a form of self-deception. The man described by Solomon is not lazy. He is extremely productive. Yet his productivity becomes sterile when it is not connected to purpose and communion. He runs alone, without realizing that his race leads him into emptiness. This lifestyle, now exalted as a symbol of success, is presented by Ecclesiastes as a silent tragedy. Solomon dismantles the illusion that accumulating material goods is synonymous with a meaningful life. No wealth replaces a soul at peace or a true presence by our side. Regarding communion, he highlights simple and profound benefits. It sustains us when we fall, warms us in cold moments, protects us in times of conflict, and strengthens our resilience in the face of adversity. Life is unstable ground, where stumbling is inevitable. and having someone trustworthy can be the difference between rising again or remaining on the ground. Wisdom also involves discernment. Not every company is healthy, but the right company is irreplaceable. Friends who build us up, partners who encourage us, upright people around us are silent expressions of the grace that sustains our existence. Finally, Solomon offers a direct and timeless warning. Whoever loves money is never satisfied with it. Whoever lives for wealth is never content with what he possesses. A soul surrendered to the love of money becomes insatiable, even when surrounded by abundance. And this does not come from someone unfamiliar with wealth. Solomon was one of the richest men of his time, surrounded by gold, palaces, servants, and everything the world could offer. Even so, he realized that wealth does not calm anxiety. Often, it intensifies it. This realization reveals how fragile it is to place our trust in material goods. Solomon observes that many accumulate riches without knowing who will inherit them, or lose them in failed ventures, ending with empty hands. Money is unstable. It can be gained with effort and lost in an instant. And even when it remains, it does not guarantee health, peace, or meaning in life. It promises security, but delivers nothing of what truly matters. The security money promises is illusory, because it has no power over what truly matters. Solomon expresses this profoundly when he says that a good name is better than the finest perfume, and that the day of death can be more significant than the day of birth. This statement is not an invitation to pessimism, but to lucidity. While perfumes and precious oils symbolize luxury, status, and pleasures that soon dissipate, a name represents something far rarer: integrity, reputation, and legacy. A name cannot be bought. It is built, and unlike possessions, it remains even when everything else is lost. With this, Solomon reminds us that life should not be evaluated merely by a promising beginning or by brilliant appearances, but by what endures when the shine fades. What truly defines an existence is not only how it begins, but how it ends. Birth brings hope, but it is the journey, how we live and what we leave behind, that reveals the true meaning of the path. Those who conclude their story with dignity, even having faced hardship, are the ones who truly deserve honor. More than material achievements, it is character that shapes the memory we leave in the world. An upright name is worth more than fleeting fame. Respect earned through truth surpasses any praise bought with vanity. In the end, we will be remembered far more for who we were than for what we possessed. And this becomes even more significant when we remember that Solomon himself had everything: riches, palaces, gold, silver, armies, vineyards, and gardens. Even so, in his poetic reflection in Ecclesiastes, he recognizes that none of this was capable of filling the emptiness in his spirit, nor of granting him a truly enduring name. Even the construction of the temple in Jerusalem, the grandest work of his reign, was not carried out to feed his personal glory, but as an expression of purpose, fidelity, and service to something greater than himself. In essence, we live in an age in which foolishness often disguises itself as cleverness. Intelligence is celebrated, while wisdom is ignored. Solomon, however, points toward a kind of wisdom that is not reduced to accumulating data or information, but to discerning the right time, what is good and what is just. True wisdom is balance. It does not lose itself in arrogance nor in recklessness. Knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to wait, is what protects us from the abyss of foolishness. At the same time, Solomon acknowledges that living wisely in an imperfect world is a constant challenge. The wise are not always heard and are often despised, yet he insists wisdom ignored is worth more than foolishness applauded. It is better to be a small light in the midst of darkness than to join the comfortable chaos of collective illusion. True wisdom is not driven by the pursuit of public approval, but by silent fidelity to what is right. We must understand this clearly. Justice does not always reveal itself in an evident way. The unjust are not always punished, and the just are not always rewarded. But recognizing that life is limited gives weight to every choice and value to every moment. By showing that both the wise and the fool reach the same end, Solomon does not despise wisdom. On the contrary, he encourages us to use it while we still have time. The difference between them is not in the final destination, but in the way each walks toward it. The wise live with purpose. The fool lives on distractions. One prepares himself, the other deceives himself. To recognize death not as a taboo, but as a reality is one of the most powerful tools for learning how to live intentionally. Death levels everyone, erases titles, positions, and possessions. But what each person builds between birth and the end reveals who they truly were. It is within this silent interval that the true value of a life is manifested. Although the end is inevitable, the way we walk toward it is a daily choice. In this sense, a name marked by integrity represents a silent victory over the fragility of riches and the fleeting nature of all things. It is a kind of legacy that resists time. The true measure of a well-lived life is not found in external brilliance, but in the way one lives under the sun, with awareness of time, respect for one's actions, and understanding of the transience of existence. Wealth can be lost, achievements can disappear, but the memory of wisdom and discernment crosses generations. It becomes a reference, inspiration, and example. That is why Ecclesiastes demonstrates that true richness is not in what one possesses, but in the uprightness with which one faces life. An unblemished reputation becomes silent proof of a life well conducted, reminding us that true value lies in how we live, not in what we accumulate. Even so, Ecclesiastes does not push us toward absolute emptiness nor toward an unrestrained pursuit of pleasure. It defends neither nihilism nor hedonism. The wisdom it proposes is simpler and, precisely for that reason, deeper. To accept the vanity of life, and even so learn to enjoy the gifts it offers. Family, friendship, a shared meal, a sunny day, simple experiences fleeting beyond our control, yet valuable in themselves. In the end, the author closes the book by reminding us that the words of the wise are like a staff that guides the path. His goal is not to explain all the mysteries of existence, but to teach us to recognize the fleeting and unpredictable nature of the world. True wisdom lies in living with honesty and integrity, trusting that well-grounded actions can restrain vanity and favor justice. This is the central teaching of Ecclesiastes. Life is brief, uncertain, and paradoxical. And even so, it is precisely within this fragility that hope and moral reflection find space to give meaning to existence. And if everything that has been said here has made you reflect, question, or see your own life with different eyes, know that this is already part of the purpose of this content. If this video helped you in any way to think more deeply about time, existence, and the meaning of being alive, I invite you to directly support this work. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you help this project continue bringing reflections, analyses, and content that go beyond the surface without concessions to the shallow or the obvious. This is Inner Odyssey. Thank you for watching.